All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the FIT40 Podcast, where we simplify exercise and nutrition for busy parents 40 plus so they can improve their health and feel amazing. I'm your host, Brian Fitzsimmons, and today we have an awesome guest with us. We have Dr. Becky Rucker in the house. She is the owner of Physio Performance in Tacoma, Washington. She has a doctorate of physical therapy and orthopedic clinical specialist. She is a certified strength and conditioning coach and barbell rehab certified as well, and a certified Pilates instructor. So with that giant combination, I cannot wait to pick Becky's brain and talk all things training, physical therapy, and how everything intersects. So Becky, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Brian, for having me on. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. I'm excited for you to give us your wisdom on a lot of these things, because I think the waters can get so muddied when we talk about different concepts when it comes to training, when it comes to physical therapy. And I think it's a really good place to start. Like when it comes to physical therapy, that's honestly how a lot of people seem to be getting into strength training, where it's like they hurt themselves and they're like, oh, if I was just a little bit stronger, this might not have happened. But we got to start with physical therapy to get out of pain. So when it comes to people that you see a lot, what are some common things, like some common issues that you're seeing a lot of that people have been coming to you for?
Well, we deal with all sorts of orthopedic issues, meaning joint issues, muscle issues, things like that. But the main things I think we see recently is low back pain, hip pain, knee pain. Those are kind of our shoulder pain, our bread and butter. I love working with any of those body parts. I love working with all body parts, but basically, when we look at one body part, we're not just looking at, like, say, the low back. We're also kind of taking into account the hip. We're taking into account like what's going on the foot, up the chain, things like that, just to make sure that it's not, you're creating this whole body experience for them and taking everything into account.
Yeah, it almost sounds like the concept. I know I've probably brought it up a few too many times on this podcast, but it's like a lot of times people think when they get hurt, it's that specific part, but sometimes the source isn't necessary, or sometimes the screamer isn't necessarily the source. Would you say that's kind of true in what you've experienced?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. We are often, like, I could have somebody have a knee issue, but I'm also looking up the chain at the pelvis, what's going on. Because, for instance, if they have a subtle leg length discrepancy, we call it a functional leg length discrepancy, that's being driven by the pelvis, the knee might be caught in between that situation and giving the pain. So we can work on the knee and the strength around the knee, but we also have to go up to the pelvis and make sure things are able to somewhat stabilize, so that we're not having this leg length discrepancy when we're going to do like squatting or walking or anything like that. So it's not just affecting the knee, but looking up and down the chain too.
Gotcha. And for people that have gone to, say, like a chiro, for example, and they tell them, oh, one leg is longer than the other, that's why you're experiencing back pain. Like sometimes it's used as a really good sales tool, but like, is there some truth to that, is basically what you're saying? Like when it gets to that dysfunctional point?
Right. Yeah. And I often work with chiropractors. Many physical therapists see this as this is our adversary, but really we can work very well together. And the way I look at the leg length thing, most people, when they come and tell me they have a leg length discrepancy, I say, well, the only way you're going to know 100% for sure if you have a leg length discrepancy is if they go in and do an x-ray of your leg. Have they done that? And they're usually like, no. So I look at their legs, I look at it one position, I look at them, then they move. Usually the leg changes, that length changes as they go from like laying down to sitting up position. So that tells us it's not really true leg length, it's really being driven by the pelvis. So this is something where everybody has asymmetries in their body, and everybody's going to have a little bit of this leg length come and go. We just don't want it to see those asymmetries go too far out of line, or that leg length become longer and longer, or just always present. So we're working on stabilizing the body to get things back to kind of a more normal, more neutral position. But it doesn't have to be perfect all the time, but it just tells me maybe I'm always seeing that left leg is longer and they're having left knee pain, and something's telling me, okay, we need to look up the chain to the pelvis to make sure that that knee is not, just being worked on the knee itself, but so that the leg is not affecting it, the leg length.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and as you're saying that, it brings me back to when I was like a younger trainer and I was like obsessed with like everything being leveled out and everything being as close, as symmetrical as I possibly could get it. And then eventually I forget who said it, but they're like, everybody's asymmetrical to a point, right? It really just depends on like if it's functional or dysfunctional, or if it causes pain or if it doesn't.
Right. And I agree with that, but I also think that we should be working towards symmetry. So even if I see something in a client that I feel like, you know what, this is not necessarily affecting you right now, but it could affect you down the road, I'm going to try to change that mechanics a little bit. For instance, you will see a lot of people that have the right foot turned out, and that's usually driven because of our like a left anterior pelvis, that asymmetry, that natural asymmetry in our body. And it's not an issue until it becomes an issue. So the more I can kind of just start to find little areas where we can create symmetry in the body, the better. That being said, like you said, I'm not going to go crazy on somebody and be like, you have to do it exactly this way and turn everything perfectly. Like, we're looking for areas where we can make minor tweaks in their body, but to restore some of that overall symmetry, but not overwhelm them.
Yeah. I hope I'm not the only person that just looked at their feet. Like, I wonder, am I turned out a little bit?
Start watching everybody and look at that right foot. The majority of people will have a subtle right, like it looks like it's the foot, but it's usually like the up the chain tibia sometimes.
I hope somebody's listening to this on the way into work and they're just scoping out their coworkers. Like, let's see who's got it. Yeah. But no, that's interesting you bring that up, because I know it's kind of weird how people will say, oh, and especially like in the physical therapy chiropractor space, doesn't really matter as far as form is concerned. It all comes down to load. It all comes down to what your body can experience. But it's like when somebody gets hurt, we always kind of find ourselves falling back on these old types of rules, like a neutral spine, like stacked joints. And it's like, why don't we just practice that to improve the longevity?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not, I think that there are, like if we want to do neutral in certain positions, but then we're also going to find like other times when I tell somebody to reach the ground, like your natural body motion is not going to keep a neutral spine as you're going to pick up a pen off the ground that fell down. You're going to go ahead and round your back. You're going to bend forward at the hips. It's a combination of both. It's when people take the extremes to too much, like always keeping neutral or always rounding. That's when we get into the trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like it's like you don't want to go in either direction too far, because you don't want to be that weirdo that's like perfectly hinging as they're picking up their child or like, or their animal or something, because it's like, that's not human. And then it's almost like you get locked into these robotic postures, and God forbid you deviate. Then it's almost like, would you say it almost like elevates your risk if you're only moving a certain way?
For sure. For sure. When people come into me, like for instance, with low back pain and they've been protecting their back for a long time, often they are what we consider hip hingers. And so they do not want to round their back at all. They're afraid to do it. And it's actually created the opposite effect for their back, where their back has gotten really stiff and it doesn't allow them to do something like reach the floor and pick up something without rounding their back. So we have to retrain that pattern of learning how to not be neutral all the time and find neutral when we need it, but also allow our body to be able to round and move in positions that round, and I do have a background in Pilates too. So we take some of higher level work, and then we also take Pilates work and we kind of combine it all together to make them find out like how their body can best work for them.
That's really cool. And it makes me think of, I heard this first from Eric Cressy, and I'm assuming that you kind of fall in line with this line of thinking too, where it's like, there is no such thing as perfect posture. And if there was, it would pretty much be like whatever is the ability to hold any position without pain, not some fixed position.
Right, for sure. Yeah, people come to me and they'll say like, okay, like they'll say, well, my posture's so bad, and they'll be rounded forward. So I'm trying to like lift it up and they're holding their shoulders back. And I tell them like, look, hey, we want to find a position and maybe have a little bit of expansion or that. But if somebody comes and they're like squeezing their shoulder blades back, what they're doing is they're kicking into the global muscles or the big muscles to try to do a postural position, if that makes sense. So like for instance, our rhomboids are not meant to be, the muscles on the back of our shoulders are not meant to be held all the time with our shoulder blades back. We'll start getting more back pain because of that. Okay. Do we want to let everything fall forward? No. But if we think like, okay, I'm going to gently lift up and like gently lift my chest, my shoulder blades might feel like they're like slightly kind of back. That's a position I can move from and have ease of motion. And that's like a posture that is gentle. Your body can hold, but it can also move from easily. We're not locked into a rigid position.
Yeah. So I guess one of my questions for you would be then like, what do you think of those posture correctors? Like the things that people throw on their shoulders and it has them like stuck like this pretty much all day.
Yeah, I never use them. Ever use them. I mean, I think maybe once a long time ago or twice, but like it's just you're not, it may be bringing body awareness to them and allowing them to feel what it feels like to not be here. But they're probably going to go the opposite way where they're either like hanging on the brace and then it's just not teaching them anything, or they're like trying to squeeze too hard in the opposite way and using kind of that wrong muscles. So, and back to the muscle, I'll kind of explain this. Like our body has, we call them global muscles, which are big mover muscles, our, quads, our glute max, our, some of our rhomboids, maybe our biceps, things like that. They move a joint. Okay. Then we have, we'll go the opposite spectrum is going to be our local stabilizers. These are all our postural muscles that like let us move easily or they hold us in place, but they don't make a lot of big movement changes. Okay. And then there's the muscles in between called global stabilizers. And they kind of do a little bit of both. They stabilize, but they also do some movement. So we're finding like if we try to do a posture job or a holding job with all the big muscles, the bracers, you'll see people that are really tight. Their body is going to go into such dysfunction because those muscles are not meant to do that. Okay. So learning sometimes in somebody that has back pain to soften, take things down so that we move with ease of motion and like recorrect just their movement patterns and then build up to where we're also layering on kind of some of these bigger movements, barbell movements, kettlebell movements, is a way to build on that back pain. But sometimes again, I'm breaking somebody down before I have to build them back up.
Yeah.
Does that make
Honestly,
sense to you?
yeah. And that's the first time I've heard it put that way because it, it makes a lot of sense with the types of different muscles and based on like what certain certain movement patterns do. Like we hear about it all the time, the postural muscles. And when we do say a farmer carry, for example, it's really rhomboid intensive and it's also intense on other parts that we don't give enough love to. And I'm curious when we're talking about that concept, it made me think a little bit about, say, joint by joint approach. And I'm curious if you use any of that. And for anybody who's not familiar with the joint by joint approach, it's like the concept of like, as you go up the chain, it's like something needs more motion, some needs more stability, some more motion, some more stability. So the socket joints, we want to be mobile. The hinge joints, we want to be super solid. But I know that's a really simplistic concept, but I'm curious what your thoughts on it are and if it kind of ties in at all.
Yeah, it definitely ties in. The way I would think of it though, like let's go back to the farmer carry we're talking about. So if I'm going to like have those kettlebells or dumbbells or trap bar or something holding that, and I'm in that position, I'm keeping those rhomboids on pretty tight. I though want to make sure that above the chain, like my neck can move easily because if I'm locked in everything, then really it's becoming a different exercise. It's becoming kind of like a plank where everything is held and braced. And that might not be the best reference because in a plank, even you should be able to relax your neck, like in the stable position. But like the idea would be like, I want you to know how to stabilize one part of your body and be able to be moving and mobile in another part of your body. So again, the neck should be relatively relaxed if I'm doing this farmer carry, or able to turn side to side. And then you're walking. So obviously your hips have to be like moving and relaxed in that position to create this ease of motion. But yes, we're going to be holding tight those weights and kind of creating the stability up in the scapulothoracic area.
You just gave me some great ideas for some progressions. So any clients listening, if you all of a sudden see some neck rotations or flexion extensions, that's all Becky's doing.
Yeah. And think of it as like, this is what I try to tell people. It's like sometimes they'll lock and then I'll say like, move your neck and they go like this and this. And I'm like, don't do that. I mean, I'm like, shake it out. So like you go and see at the Olympics, you see the athletes like shaking out. Like that's really what I'm trying to kick into is that like release, like that quick motion, quick release. And it shouldn't be anything that's like, okay, turn your head to the right, turn your head to the left. It should just be like, okay, shake your neck out, go back to like an ease of motion position.
Yeah. And to that point, it honestly surprised the hell out of me when I was listening to people talk on this concept of like the rotating your neck. And honestly, when you tell somebody look left, it's like their whole body just turns and you're just like, okay, is this a inability thing or is this just a something you've always done type deal? And it seems like as people age, they definitely lose the ability to fully turn their neck, to fully dip their chin and things like that. And when we're talking life skills, like being able to turn your head while you're driving or something, that could have massive carryover.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. And one area that kind of you talk about too, that I often find, which we're trying to get people to learn how to dissociate this, is like when we squeeze the shoulder blades back, when I'm doing a row and I'm like working on, okay, we got to work those shoulder blades, not just the shoulder joint, but we're squeezing back. I also need them to be able to learn how to keep the rib cage down, because what happens is we do this and we pop, which is okay sometimes, but sometimes we need the ability for the shoulder blades to move independently from that thoracic spine. So hopefully that makes sense in a sense.
Yeah, definitely. And on the concept of popping, because I know I have this conversation pretty frequently right in the beginning of training, because I incorporate a lot of mobility work, especially in the beginning if people have certain things that are, say, for example, like immobile or just very, very tight. So that popping sensation, I know it freaks a lot of people out a little bit, but how would you exactly describe it if there was no pain along with it?
Like, so saying, are you saying at their joint, if they're doing a shoulder thing and they're getting popping in their shoulder joint?
Yeah, like say they're doing like a handcuff and they're feeling pop, 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 pop all the way through, but it's not painful. And if anything, it might be even a little relieving.
Depends on the situation here. Like usually if I'm in that situation, there's some dysfunction going on. So we're going to try to figure out why it's going on. And so I'm going to alter the motion a little bit. I'm going to drop the weight. I'm going to do something to kind of like lessen that popping, because the popping is telling me some sort of asymmetry in the muscle balance is going on, or they're not mobile enough to do this, or they're not strong enough. So I try to do it. If it happens here and there, I'm not that worried about it. But if it's doing it every time, it really is something that needs to be addressed, because over time, it probably will become an issue. You may not be feeling pain right then, but we want to just kind of get a little bit out of that. And that is a case where I probably would send somebody to a physical therapist. Like something is, if they're not having pain right then, but they are having a lot of this popping, to go in and get a movement assessment or figure out like, what is my tight part that's creating this tension, that's creating this popping? What's my weak part that's not doing the balance? That might be an area to do that. But again, if it happens here and there, not too worried about it. But if it's doing it all the time, then it's something that we try to address.
That's a good point, because in my experience, it's usually starts off heavy popping and then gradually goes away as we get stronger, as we work on the right things. But from a physical therapist point of view, that makes so much sense, where it's like, if this has been an ongoing thing and it's not getting better, it's not showing any improvement, it's like, yeah, probably something to be looked at.
Yeah. And I would say, I have to tell you this, I used to, like, when I was a physical therapist, that's what I was taught. Just tell them the popping is like normal and it will go away. And you are correct. It does often go away as we get a little bit stronger, as long as we're not getting massive pain. So that's an okay way to coach it. But at the same time, now I'm at the point where I want to figure out, why is it popping right away? And I want to get that resolved right away, so that we're figuring that out. But to do it your way is also a good way, as long as it's not increasing their pain.
Yeah. And I think also too, it comes down to understanding exercise selection, and then like what level of graded exposure we want to be at, I guess, when it comes to what they can handle and where we need to go. Because I think that's one of the things that people don't appreciate enough about fitness in general, is like, there are different flavors for different seasons that you're in, depending on where your starting point is. Because if you think, oh, I'm just going to barbell bench press what I used to do back in the day, and your shoulder is pissed off, it's just going to make it worse. But if you have the knowledge to say, let's do a dumbbell press or a landmine press or a push-up, and that frees up the shoulder in a way that doesn't cause pain or doesn't cause popping, it's like, boom.
Right. Yes, I agree. And the interesting thing about the shoulder is, we used to think it was all the rotator cuff, and now people are like learning a lot more about the scapula and how the scapula is affecting that shoulder. But we're also learning, guess what? It's not, the pecs often can be like in shoulder pain. The pec actually can be weak or gripping or pulling things forward. So it's one of those things, we need to strengthen some of those bigger muscles. We might need to do it in a way that is graded, and or like a lower weight in a smaller range of motion, but going towards eventually a bigger range of motion. Just to get things back to where they need to be.
Yeah. And I know, at least in my own experience, like with my right shoulder has been the forever problem. It was always the reason I could never get to 315 on bench. It just would
Right.
crap out too early and I'd always get mad. But then switching to weighted push-ups or landmine presses, and all of a sudden it's smooth as butter and feels amazing and no pain. So it's like you got to figure out what your body needs.
Yeah, for sure. And I love landmine presses. That's probably like one of my top shoulder exercises. And I don't start there with like somebody that comes to me with pain, but I start with exercises that open the lats. And with most people, I'm not gonna say everybody, but many people are tight through the lats. So we have to get the length before we can actually move into that position. And then I start in maybe even supine positions where they're learning how to like use a banded resistance overhead. But then we progress to Y's, T's, W's. We progress to landmine press pretty quickly because it is something that we don't do enough of actually overhead reaching in a safe way.
Yeah. And I've always been curious because I'm like, would this satisfy that? Because in my head, I'm like, do we necessarily need to overhead press, or can we get away with something like, say, a lat pull down to experience that range of motion?
Well, I guess I would say like if you're doing a lat pull down and you're releasing to the top, you're getting the lat pull down, but the release isn't getting the press up. So for somebody, and this comes down to like a postural assessment, for somebody that comes in and they've got really sloping shoulder blades drop down, like I usually know they're a little bit more lat dominant. And so they've probably been doing a lot of pulling. Okay, we see this with firefighters a lot. We actually see it with more hypermobile people. Baseball players often have.
I was going to say baseball, sometimes lacrosse players or people that are like rotational sports. For some reason, they always got the low shoulder.
Right. So I mean, they're going to go landmine press because they need actually that upper trap strength. They need that like that scapula to learn how to go up, so to strengthen up. So upper trap, serratus, all that. So yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's honestly really, really helpful, especially for people listening, because it can really kind of help get the wheels turning if you are in charge of your own workout program, to be like, oh, I should do this and that, because so many people end up on one end of that seesaw and not enough on the other end when it comes to pushing, pulling, squatting versus hinging and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. And I don't usually like, sometimes if somebody comes to me and they're having a major shoulder issue and I notice that they have those slipping shoulders or depressed scapula, we call it, I might take out pull-ups for a while because they've been like wanting to do pull-ups or a lot of pulling. I might say like, hey, let's just take this out for a little bit, but then we're going to progress back to like 2-to-1 pushing to pulling, like at this point, to start to create this balance of your shoulder blade being able to come up in your body. And some of that will involve like just more of or push-up press, and some of it's going to be more of an overhead press. But then we'll start to reintegrate things like a pull-up and things like that can go back to that more lat dominant position. So, and I wanted to also make a point, in people that have those slipping shoulders, they often get the sensation of like tightness through their upper traps. And they think they look in the mirror and they see these big bulky upper traps, but it's not really a strong muscle. It's usually a lengthened muscle. And so we need to, when they say like, oh, it's tight, it really is telling us that muscle is gripping. It's creating this tension, it's holding there because it's not strong. And that's that sensation of tightness, versus if we start to strengthen the upper trap, all of a sudden your body's going to go like, oh, like I don't feel so tight here anymore. And that we get that balance of not these depressed, dropped shoulder blades, but more of a lifted, relaxed shoulder, and the neck pain and the shoulder blade tension or shoulder tension goes away.
It's interesting you bring that up, because this week in particular, I've been on massage duty for my fiance who went to Orange Theory and just overdid that area. Mm-hmm. And to your point, like she's never done tons of shrugs or tons of heavy carries. So obviously it's not like a super strong area, but she's feeling it all right up in there. And I'm just like, I've been digging that out for like the whole week. And it's just, it's tough when people don't understand that when you are weak, then you could potentially get very tight.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of those things where we have to figure out, is this a long muscle that's needs more strength, or is it truly like a tight compressed muscle overall that needs a little bit more length? So, when we look at the body, we're figuring that out, and we're putting that into our programs.
Yeah. And I think it's also a good case for other modalities potentially as well, like having massage or having things like that in the mix, which brings up one of the points I wanted to talk about, which was Pilates, for example, because I know, especially when we talk about weaker muscle groups, like Pilates seems to hit all those muscles that like don't usually get hit in a traditional strength training program. I know
Right.
I had what I guess, I don't know if this is a Pilates thing, but I got told I had Chihuahua legs at the end of my first one because they were
Okay.
just
With a little
my
shaking. Yes.
knees were
Yep.
shaking because my adductors were so weak. But
Mhm,
when it
mhm.
comes to Pilates in general, if you were to explain to somebody who's maybe interested, like how does it work so well between strength training, between physical therapy and things like that? Like how does it fit?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things like I love it as a blend here. Like I use it in my rehab programs, not with everybody, but with a lot of people, I'll kind of sprinkle a little bit of it in. But it is something where you are learning to stabilize with those small muscles. Like I tell people, like, think about a ballet dancer. Like you look at them and you think they look like, not that they look strong, but then you see these motions, they look effortless, they look graceful. But how it takes so much strength to do what they're doing. But how do they do that? They don't do it by these rigid, hard movements. They have to learn how to stabilize through these ranges. They have to learn how to create this momentum. So when we do the Pilates, our idea initially is to start to think of like a relaxed, I had talked a little bit earlier about the little stabilizers, relaxed motion, but like relaxed motion that starts to build this deeper strength within the body. And often some of the exercises we do are based on endurance. So you're doing a little bit more reps, less weight, specific stability exercises, but it gives you this foundational strength that can take you, and then you go be able to do a barbell lift and you're like so much stronger because you have these little muscles working.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And as you're saying that, it's making me think about this whole concept of like tonality, which is one of those things that a lot of people don't really hear about when it comes to core training, for example. And being that I work a lot with moms who are postpartum for maybe a year, maybe like 20, 30 years, but it always comes back to kind of like the bracing aspect and understanding that. And I think Pilates is a great teaching tool to understand reflexive bracing and like contracting while also being able to let go. How do you like to teach that? Because I think a lot of people need to understand that like you need to be able to function where you're a little bit looser and also a little bit tighter depending on the situation.
Right, right. And I see this a lot, and there's going to be controversy with what I say here, but
Buckle up, people.
so you need to be able to, like, if I look at somebody and see whether or not they can roll down or roll up, or if they just hinge up from laying back down or how they move, because people that are taught to plank and to brace hard is they often can't move their body in a controlled, stable way while keeping it safe. So like a roll down, for instance, we need to be able to hollow out the stomach, pull that belly button into the spine while moving back. Like you see this beautiful motion. If somebody tries to plank back, they're just using more of these outer braces. Okay. So when I'm working with somebody, I look at like, okay, can you brace for a big lift? Okay. And can you brace for a plank? But then can you also activate that transverse abdominis, pull that belly button in, round, like roll down, because that roll, it's not just important for the roll down, it's important for many other positions. So it's one of those things that your body should learn both aspects to be strong, have a mobile body, because having the ability to use that transverse abdominis and roll creates mobility in your body. When we just brace all the time, creates rigidity in our body. And we need a balance between the rigidity and that like stable mobility.
Yeah. And again, back to the whole crowd of moms postpartum, like fun fact, like a lot of times people who experience incontinence, for example, are not because they don't have the ability to tighten up. It's that they don't have the ability to let go. So
Right.
you need to be able to master both. And just a little fun fact for everybody, the transverse abdominis is that like little sheath right behind all the blocky parts of your abs. And the stronger and tighter that is, the more it'll give an impression of a tighter waist. So just saying it's kind
Yes.
of important and it's kind of cool.
Yeah. And it's also that muscle that closes down when those moms have a diastasis. So that when, often when we get pregnant, we get a opening between the rectus muscle. And so you see sometimes a little bit of coning or doming in the area when somebody returns to doing sit-ups. So it's important to be able to learn how to activate that transversus, which is deep to those rectus muscles, because that will close down that area where that diastasis is. And it allows your body to function at a much stronger basis for everything else.
Yeah. And when it does come to the coning and doming, how do you like to go about it? Like, because I know it might not necessarily do anything in the moment, but it's something that we definitely want to improve upon over time, right?
Right, for sure. I mean, I see it all the time. I actually see it with a lot of guys too.
Like hernia and things like that?
Not hernia. I see doming.
No.
It's particularly what happens is guys that either have gained weight and get more of a bigger belly, or guys that breathe through their stomach, or guys that have never learned how to use their transversus. They just always like brace hard, but they brace by pushing out. They start to get an opening in that rectus. And so you'll see, like if they go to do a sit-up or they lay on their back and they lift their legs up, you might see like a doming over their abdominal, upper abdominal area. And so it's reteaching them how to not just kind of engage that transversus, but move with different breath patterns and things like that too.
Gotcha. And would that be similar for the ladies as well? Like just understanding how they need to use their core in whatever situation that is?
Yes, for sure. I do often see new moms come into me and we'll work on that. And is it going to open up like at some point during the days when you're doing normal activities or when you're, doing some other exercises, it is. But the more that our brain brings awareness to the fact that we can use that transversus to close it down, then we can start to integrate it into our exercises and things like that. And that's the main thing like that I say with people is like, okay, feel this, like I'll have them relax everything. And then feel that area, they'll kind of do a sit-up. I say, actually relax your abs and try to do a sit-up. They'll do it. They usually feel like their fingers will dive down in between. And then I'll say, okay, I want you to kind of think of that belly button drawing in, creating this tension. Sometimes there's like the pelvic floor is involved with this, and then I'll say, see how it creates this closure. And now you can't put your fingers in between your abs. And they're like, whoa. So like, I want you to just have that sensation for like when you're doing your exercises, and over time, that rectus muscle will start to kind of come back together and stay together, and you won't have to think about it all the time either.
Yeah. And for anybody doing that, would you say it could be pretty common to get like a little bit of a cramping, almost like muscle burning sensation when that happens? Just so people know what to expect.
Well, it depends. I mean, yes, cramping out with new moms is very common. Or even women later on that have had kids, like it's often common to get cramping through that region. Will it always happen when you're trying to do the closure? No, but it's not uncommon to have cramping through there. So don't be worried about that.
Cool. Now we know what to expect. It will be a whole lot less scary just in case it does happen. Now, when it comes to the barbell, because I know we mentioned landmine presses in the past earlier in this show, and I'm curious, going back to the barbell, how do you like to utilize it? Because I know a lot of people pretty much only use the barbell for bench, squat, deadlift, and it has so many other uses. And if somebody has that, say at their home gym, I think getting a landmine attachment, which is like $40, could open up like a whole new world. So like, what are some of your favorite exercises and favorite uses for the barbell, whether it's regular or landmine?
Okay. So landmine, let's talk about landmine. And two options if you don't have that attachment would be putting it in the corner of a room, or just taking one of your big plates. And because we use these in our strength class, we just take out the big plates. We put the barbell kind of on an angle in the little socket area and use it that way. Okay. So you can do that.
And you could also cut out a tennis ball, guys, like just make a plus sign with a tennis ball and stick it in there.
Oh, that's a new one. I need to do that. And yeah.
Oh yeah.
So we use that obviously for the landmine, but then we use the landmine, not just for landmine press, but one of my favorite exercises for like anti-side bend is just like an up and over with that landmine position. There's
like
so
that
many things.
windshield where you just go back and forth with your hands.
Kind of like that. We use it just shoulder to shoulder just to make sure that it's not pulling them sideways. Like the idea with that was I'm pressing up. If the weight's pulling me down, it's going to we want to be heavy enough that it's going to feel like it's going to push them down, but they're trying to keep straight up. So they're kind of like keeping this brace. And this is where I'm bracing.
More towards like landmine use stuff where you get the whole body involved.
Right. Yeah, which is also awesome too. That's more of that like integration, rotation, core, which would kind of be like our next step. Our first step might be the anti-side bend, but then going to that would be awesome. So but the landmine use can be used for so many different things. We can do just rows, single arm rows with it. Again, the overhead press. So that's there. The other one I use a lot with people who are not used to using barbells is hip thrusts. Like that is one of the safest exercises to start with somebody particularly that has low back pain or dealt with low back pain, but they want to get a little bit heavier with their weight. And they get really excited when they start doing this and they're like, oh my gosh, I can do this without having back pain and I can start to lift heavy. And it just gives them that sensation of, wow, like I'm getting stronger. I can get even stronger. So I think hip thrust is a great way to start people if they're wanting exposure to the barbell.
Because it's like you're working all the muscles you want to work, but there's no axial loading or that compression of the spine, which usually can piss people's backs off.
Right. Yes, for sure. And I usually do it more of the scoop version. So I keep the head forward and the rib cage down because I don't really want them going into their back, if they're having back pain often.
So like a Brett Contreras style-ish, where it's like a very heavy on the crunch.
Yes, I do more of that because I feel like I can see people when they start to go back this way. Often people will overuse their back instead of using their glutes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, and I like cueing that too, is almost like you're rocking back onto your shoulders while keeping the crunch. Cause then like people are not like just flexing, extending. It's like, no, they're pushing their butt up as they rock back.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And the other cool thing about that too, if somebody has neck pain and we're working on their neck, it actually, if we're like in that position, we keep the head forward, like we're actually keeping this like deep neck flexor work going on there too. So another way to like integrate some neck stuff into your program, so I just think it's an awesome way to add on. Obviously, like we do back squats, front squats. We don't do them as often with our physical therapy clients unless somebody is coming to us and they want that, or they need that for their sport or something going on. It kind of just depends on what their goals are. So those are kind of the main things I would say. I mean, there's probably a million things I'm missing right now, but lots of, yeah. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's really good for, I think, people who are interested in this stuff, because I mean, honestly, hip thrusting alone could probably get somebody potentially out of pain that they've been dealing with for a really, really long time. Just comes down to doing it correctly and doing it enough, or just enough, not too much, not too little. So, I mean, this stuff can be super, super helpful. But I think the key really is to figure out how to go about your fitness journey and understand where you're at and what you need. So if somebody was trying to navigate where they're at, I know this is going to be a very broad question, but like, how would you say for most people that you work with, how would you like them to kind of get into fitness in a way that's going to be best?
Yeah, I mean, we're always encouraging people, like we ask right off the bat, like, what do you do for exercise? Most people that come to our clinic do exercise. So we're kind of figuring that out and figuring out how they're doing exercise. Some people don't. So then we're saying like, hey, look, this is the point we need to start to like think about this long term. But if somebody comes to us with pain and they also either want to get back to their exercise or they are still exercising, I'm just going to evaluate like, what level is your pain at? So probably a good guide for people would be, number one, is your pain like less than a 5 out of 10 consistently? If it's above a 5 and they're getting that like daily or pretty often, we probably need to really be like hitting the foundations first, and kind of building up from there. If their pain is a 4 and it's like a little more 4 or less, a little more intermittent, then I'm usually okay with them exercising. I want them to exercise and do their classes. I might just say, let's just think about holding off on this and or modifying this or thinking about this. So one thing I tell all my clients is, you go to a fitness class, like you're in charge of your body. Like you don't need to do what that instructor is telling you. And you need to speak up for yourself and say like, hey, like you can go and tell them ahead of time if you want to. You don't have to, but just be like, hey, I'm dealing with a neck injury. I might have to modify some things in this class. Just like, if you see my form is wrong, maybe let me know, but I'm just letting you know that, because sometimes we get this thing in our minds, especially when we're younger, that we have to do what they're doing and we have to do heavier. We have to go, where I now go to all these classes and I don't go as heavy as they're going, or, in certain exercises, or I choose to do a different exercise because it's better for my body, or I choose to alter it. Sometimes the instructor will come up if they don't know what's going on and kind of mention, and it might just be like, hey, I've been told by my physical therapist, or I can say I'm a physical therapist, but you should always tell my clients, like, say, I've been told by my trainer, I've been told by just like to modify this for my body. And everybody should be okay with that. Like
any trainer should appreciate that and know what to do.
Yeah. I had somebody yesterday who was like, I won't do that. I don't want to do that. And she was younger. And it's just at this point, me continuing to reinforce, like, you have to be in charge of your body and like be okay with other people, like, maybe thinking it's weird that you're not doing the same exercise, but you have to learn to be okay with that. If your body is going to be here for longevity and have this great, awesome, like, body for years, you need to treat it well and learn to like speak up for yourself. So
yeah. And I think it depends really on why we're speaking up. Is it one, because it's not the right exercise for you, in which case, please, like, any trainer that's running that wants you to speak up, because you getting hurt is way worse than anything else. So you got to really understand. And if they turn you away or like dismiss you, then that's probably a sign that you need to find a different class. But also, on the flip side of the coin, you don't want to be that person that's like, I don't want to do this because it's hard, because it's like you don't want to experience like the muscle burning sensation and the good, quote unquote, pain that comes with exercise. So it's like, don't take advantage of it. But chances are, if you're the person who's like a little hesitant to speak up, that's not going to be you anyway.
Right. Yeah. And another great point you made there is like, it's one of those things, like, people are taught, like, I shouldn't lift heavy because I've got a back injury. Okay. We know that's not the truth. Okay. We need to kind of figure out why that heavy. Like, did you go too hard, too fast? Did you not have good foundations and strength before you did this? But like, lifting heavy is great for your back in the long run. So we can't be afraid to do something because it's hurt our back, but we also need to listen to our body when we're going through something. Same thing with like knees over toes. Like, so many people come to me still and say, like, I can't, like, I thought I wasn't supposed to bring my knees over my toes when I squat. And I'm like, nope, actually, like, we may in the initial part, like, limit, if you're having pain at this point, we might limit how far, but our goal is to get your knees over your toes and strengthen in a position that you like strengthen in that position, because you're going to be living in that position.
Yeah. It's almost like when we're talking about range of motion, things like that, the further you can go into those quote unquote no-no areas where it's like your knee is traveling over your toes or you're bending your back excessively, the more you could do that with the right amount of weight and progressively get stronger, the more resilient you're going to be.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But to your point, it's really just knowing like, hey, where do we need to be? Because if you do too much, too fast, too soon, that spells out injury.
Right. For sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've covered so many good things in this podcast. Like, I honestly think people listening are going to get a lot out of it, get a lot of ideas for their own programs, or even just know how to speak up a little bit for themselves in a situation that might not be serving them with where they're at in their group class or something like that. So thank you so much, Becky, for coming on and giving us all this knowledge. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. It was awesome. So, and I definitely, like, our strength group has a lot of 40 to 60-year-olds, and it's just such a fun, awesome group of people to work with. So I know, like, I hope your audience really appreciates this and has fun with it, because your body is resilient and it can get stronger. And even if you have an injury, I want people to know, like, your body can find a way to strengthen and get stronger and get to a point where maybe you have some pain here and there, but you're managing it, and it's not taking over your life. So
yeah. And I mean, to layer onto that, like, if you get a cut, it scabs, it heals. Your body will find a way if you give it the right stuff. Now, if anybody heard you talk about all these concepts and they're like, wow, Becky's awesome, I want to see more of her stuff, where can they find you?
Yeah, so the main place is on Instagram, and that would be at Dr. Becky .DPT, and also at the Physio Performance is my company. So those are the two main places that we have right now. We're working on some other additional YouTube things, but that will be down the road coming up.
Awesome. And if anybody listening right now is in that Tacoma area and you're not working out currently, you better get your butt to Physio Performance.
Yes. Yeah. Our website's thephysioperformance.com. So if you have any additional information or want to email me, just check out the website and you can contact me from there.
Awesome. Awesome. And to everybody listening, thank you so much for making this all the way through. And as a thank you to Becky, if at any point you heard anything where you're like, wow, that struck a nerve, light bulb moment where there's somebody in your life that definitely needs to hear that, go ahead, send this podcast their way. They will thank you, and so will we. All right. So again, thanks to everybody. I'll see you next time. But until then, go kick some ass. Bye-bye.